Welcome to notodosecuraconvicks, your go-to destination for Latinas getting real with their healing journey. We are so thrilled to have you here with us today. First off, we want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all our listeners. Your support, your loyalty mean the world to us. Without you, none of this would even be possible. We also want to take a moment to express how much your support matters. Every download, share, and like helps us grow and reach more people who might benefit from our content. So, if you enjoy what you hear today, I encourage you to hit that download button and share our episodes with your friends, your family, and anyone who you think might enjoy them. Your actions truly make a difference in helping us expand our podcast family. So once again, thank you for being a part of our journey with us. Let's continue to learn, grow, and explore together. Now, let's jump right into today's episode.
Mi gente, welcome back to No Todo Se Cura Convicks. My name is Jessie.
I am Maggie.
I'm Heidi.
And we're so excited about this episode, especially me. I'm super excited about it because this is an amazing person that I think you all would love to pick his brain. But also, for me, he is more than just a therapist, which he is. But so much. He means so much to me in regards to my supporting system. I know that many times we talk about how we need to get several people to be part of our support system because one person can't hold spaces for everything. But I am a lucky girl because I have this one particular friend who holds several hats for me and holds a lot of space. And so this is my friend who I love to hang out and have fun and laugh. He is also the person that hosts space when I really need to just release stress and talk about things and challenges that happen in life. But he's also an amazing therapist that I'm constantly picking his brain in regards to therapy and mental health in our community. So he's one person in my community, in my support system, that knows how to hold so many space for me. And I am so grateful for him. So I am going to share him, but just for a little bit. You get to see how amazing this person is. Are you guys excited?
Yes.
Yes, very
All
much.
right. So ahora voy a ser profesional and I'm going to read his bio. So today we have Carlos Alvarez. Carlos Alvarez is a Bronx native and third generation Puerto Rican. Carlos is a licensed clinical social worker and currently a director of social work at a charter school in Harlem. He used to be my supervisor.
Nice.
And he, mi gente, has a private practice también, so you can reach out to him, providing individual therapy for children, adolescents, and adults. And Carlo is currently working on completing his PhD. Mi gente, soon he's going to be Dr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Love
At
it.
Fordham University Graduate School of Social Service, and his research is focused on the effect of restorative practice, interventions, and trauma-informed care in elementary schools. Amazing work. Carlos completed his master in social work in 2011 from Hunter College and his bachelor in psychology with a minor in English at the City College of New York in 2009. And Carlos has been providing grief counseling to children and families for over a decade, supporting families in their journey towards processing loss and grief. He is amazing when it comes to processing loss and grief. That is his concentration. And that's what we're going to talk about today, about grief, and especially how we process grief in our community, Latino community. Welcome, Carlos.
Welcome, Carlos.
Thank you, Heidi, Jesse, Maggie. Jesse, I love you. Can't say it enough. So happy to be here today, and thank you for inviting me.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. You're doing amazing work. Amazing. Like, I started working with Carlos, when was it? In 2000 and what? I can't even remember, like
Or
2015,
wow,
19, 18,
maybe
17.
2015. Who knows?
Yes.
It's been a
And
while.
this, I strongly believe that I am the therapist that I am today, and I have my private practice because of Carlos. Like, he is full of knowledge and wisdom, and he was such a supporting system for me in this new role. I was the first time working with elementary schools, right? So little ones, the ages of 4 to like 10. That was a new experience for me. And we worked so much in regards to trauma and grief, which was a new role for me. And you made it so much fun, and you really gave me a lot of confidence in the work that I do. And it was just an amazing experience. And thank you so much for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I felt the same. Like it just felt like Bonnie and Clyde, right? It felt like,
Yes, it did. It
oh man,
did.
having you as a partner, and I still miss you every day.
I miss you
And
too.
you've gone for years, so I still miss you a lot.
Yes. I miss
Yeah,
you too.
it's just those were my golden years. So thank you
Yes.
for that.
And here we are still together. We meet up. We talk about therapy. We talk about mental health. We talk about life. And we also know how to have fun.
That's a
So
wonderful connection,
it
friendship,
is. I call
mentor.
him, yeah, my brother from another mother. Is the brother I
Hmm.
never had.
Yeah.
Enough. Yeah. Let's start.
Ya se acabó lo
So
piropo.
why don't we start first, Carlos, by you letting us know and explaining what is grief and the different types of grief, because there is different types of grief.
Yeah. I mean, when we think about grief, it sounds like a scary word that we hear, but we don't really understand or really know about sometimes. And I like to make it really simple for everybody. Like, grief is just the way we feel or the things we do after a loss. Very simple. Grief is not time bound, right? It can be different depending on our culture, who we are, our upbringing. But very simply, grief is what we do or we feel after a loss. What there are, though, is different kinds of losses. And so, I often say, you might have heard psychological loss, physical loss, and then, of course, definitive loss is like someone died. All right. That's what we call that's definite. There's no coming back, or at least we know for now. there's no coming back. But I like to tell families like psychological loss can feel right like saying goodbye without the person leaving. So, when we're grieving with psychological loss, it's like maybe the person still lives with us, but they're not the same person,
Hmm.
right? Maybe they're suffering from major depression or maybe they got Alzheimer's and dementia and they don't even know your name anymore.
Wow.
And even though they didn't die, it's a loss. And you start grieving without knowing, because that person is no longer the person that you once knew. And so that's that psychological loss, right? That's saying goodbye, but without them leaving. The other type of loss I like to say is about physical. And that's like, we all know about this one very much, right? We're talking about separation, divorce. The person's physically leaving the environment, they're leaving your home. And that's like leaving, but without saying goodbye. So it's the opposite, right? It's like for the psychological, it's like saying goodbye, but without leaving. But for the physical loss of someone due to the divorce or separation, they're leaving the home, and sometimes, they might not be saying goodbye. For both those kinds of losses, sometimes there's not a lot of closure because the person's still alive. In one way, they're away and somewhere, maybe they started another family, they're living life, right? And the other one, they're still here with us, but they're just not the same. So there's no closure. I still have to see this person. Maybe I still have to interact with them. Maybe I have to be the one to take care of them now. I don't know, but things aren't the same.
Mm.
That is so interesting because when we think about grief, we think about, oh, someone passed away and that's why we're grieving. In our community, we don't really talk about the other types of loss, right? Like you mentioned, like the loss of someone that is actually still there, probably living with you, but has Alzheimer, doesn't know you, or is, like dealing with cancer and is very ill. Let's just say someone who's very ill. This person is still here, but it's not the same person before. Right. The connection is not there anymore. And that's a loss. Even those that are, like you mentioned, divorce and separation. But when we were working together, we dealt with a lot of children that dealt with incarceration, parents being in prison. And we don't talk about that type of loss in our community as much as we talk about the one that it's pretty much okay to talk about. Someone passed away and now we're sad and we're grieving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, you know, it's not just about losing a person and who they were with you, but it also changes who you are, right? So if you lost a parent or both parents, right, you lose that identity of being a daughter, a son, right? And it's also the identity that you lose, right? We wear multiple hats, we have multiple identities. They're all intersecting and interwoven within each other, right? And and sometimes loss takes one of those from you,
Mm-hmm.
and you try to, and you're not only grieving not having the person there, but you're also grieving, well, who am I now,
Mm-hmm.
or what am I now? And
Mm-hmm.
so the loss is complicated. It's not as easy as we would like to think it is.
Yeah. Even like when you're experiencing like emotional trauma, like if you're being raised by a parent, a caregiver who is depressed, right? You still want, like, there's this view of like a caregiver should be loving and caring and holding and nurturing, and you don't get that. You're still grieving that, even though you never experienced it. That's still a form of a loss, right?
Absolutely. And that speaks to that identity of who we are, or who we think we are, who we wish we were,
Yeah.
who we
Yeah.
want to be,
Yeah.
um, how we see other people around us, our friends, people we aspire to, and people who inspire us. You know, wanting to model and follow in their path, or and right, then create my own. And when a loss happens, or they're gone, or right, it redefines who we are.
Yeah. And Carlos, can you talk a little bit more about the process or the stages? People talk all the time about the stages of grief. And there's this sort of like stigma about the stages, but also like this expectation that you need to go through the whole stage in a particular way. What are your thoughts about it?
So the stages is a porqueria.
Really? Oh my
I like it.
gosh.
Stages
No, no,
of porquería.
I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna throw the baby out the window with the bathwater. I'm not like I'm kidding. Like, I'm gonna give props to the stages, right? Right, the stages were like, this is a Swiss American psychiatrist who came up with
Yep.
these stages back in the '60s, right?
Mm.
And so when you think about how culturally relevant it might be towards other cultures, it was based on her observation and her own practice, right? It was based on
Mm.
what she's observed in her clients as she focused in on grief, and they were they were very helpful, right? And I think many of us know denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, right? So the idea that we don't even acknowledge the loss because we're in denial, right? Then we're angry. We might be angry that the person's gone, but we might also be angry that there are unsolved mysteries or issues that weren't addressed, right? We might be angry at ourselves for not having done things that we should have, not having broken promises that we never fulfilled or kept with the person. With the bargaining, it's supposed to be about, what if I would have done this differently? And then we all get into the what ifs, the what if and what if and what if, but what if, right? And then the idea is that you go through each of these stages, and then, you know, towards the latter end, you find yourself, as you're learning to accept the loss, you find yourself coming to terms with it, you get down, depressed, and then finally acceptance. But as research has shown, and as you know, in my own practice, like it's not linear. It's not
Mm.
okay. I'm gonna do. You know what? I'm gonna be in denial for 2 weeks, and then you know what? I'm gonna do anger for a week. Actually, nah. I'm mad. I'm mad. Let me do anger for a month at least. Right? Like it
Or tell
doesn't.
the
You know.
tell the client you're supposed to be in anger right now.
Right.
Not
You're
Right.
taking
Wait.
too
Wait. Wait.
long. You're taking too long on this feeling and these emotions.
Exactly. Like you've been in the step too long. Or wait a minute. You're skipping
You're
anger?
skipping.
No. You, we don't do that. We don't do that. You can't skip anger, right?
It's
so
true.
I
It's true.
so I think we've learned over the years that wait a minute, if we call it stages, it gives a sense that it's a linear process, and it's not. It's a cyclical process. It's a you can jump and go back. You can go from one to another. It's really it's much more complicated than that.
Yes. And the time frame too, because I feel like people are like I hear clients of mine and even people in my community saying like, just like let's say when they're grieving a loss in a relationship, a breakup, because that's also a loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? A breakup. And they're like, oh my God, it's been a month and I still haven't been over this, right? Why is there a time frame?
Yeah.
Why do people put a time frame to loss and grief?
And I can imagine that you may think you, let's say, experienced a sadness and then you're okay, you're accepting. And then all of a sudden, you're like, I should be just accepting forever. And this is it. You can come back to these feelings again. Something can trigger it and you can go right back to, sadness all over again after you thought you were over it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like to
Mm-hmm.
think sometimes as grief. I'm like, grief is like a Long Island iced tea. Like a whole bunch of alcohol in like one cup. It's like all these emotion in one body.
I like that, Maggie.
And I don't think
So
people
poetic.
understand it because we're so used to like if I'm angry, this is how I feel when I'm angry. This is how I feel when I'm happy. Grief, it's like you're having all of those at the same time in different moments, and you don't know when they're gonna come up. And you might think, "Oh, I'm good, I'm happy today," and then now I'm angry, now I'm sad. So it's like this cocktail of just emotions that come up and they go and they come. I mean, I feel like that's kind of the way that I think of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think because when people think about it, that it's time bound, when it's past a year, you're like, what is wrong with me? Right? Why am I still doing this? Right? And then we blame ourselves, we get upset at ourselves because our mindset is that it should end. Right? And for certain types of losses, there isn't closure. There is no ending, right? Like for a loss with someone that dies, right? We have things that we do that help us cope with it. But like
Mm-hmm.
a loss of a relationship, the person moved on and has another family, I still see them on Facebook. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm reminded of my life with the person every time I go on Facebook, every time I open Instagram, or whatever the case may be, right? So like my grief triggers, or those feelings come up again. And so I think, when we make it time bound, we're just kidding ourselves, right? Because what we're doing is like we're setting ourselves up to be disappointed when we feel like we should be better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, Carlos, absolutely. Like, there's this whole thing about we should be better, we should be strong. Like, there's people that just even refuse to go through the grief. Like, I remember when we used to work together, where we would experience like even parents and children not wanting to go through the process of grief, or parents immediately someone passed away and reaching out to us and being like, I think that my daughter or my son needs counseling because so and so passed away. And we used to be like, if they're crying, if they're grieving, that's okay. Like, that's healthy. We want them to do that. You don't have to rush to counseling or send your child to counseling. So in those situations, how do family are able like to support, especially in the Latino community? Because there's this whole feeling of like you have to be strong. And if you're
Right.
grieving and if you're grieving for X amount of time, that's too much. And you have to go to therapy. Where it's just like, no, this is okay. This is that person just sitting with their emotions and processing things, and grief is healthy. How can the family support?
Right. So I think, wow, that's a loaded question and
I know.
I got lots of thoughts. Yes, I think it's coming to terms that grieving is not like you grieve and you end, right? You grieve, you move on, and you take it with you. And then you experience another loss in life, right? And then hopefully you've processed the first or couple that you've done, right? So that when you experience loss again, you feel more psychologically prepared, or you feel more physically prepared to handle it. And I think when we rush to treatment quickly, and we're like, we're saying without saying, you can't do this on your own. We're saying without saying, we don't believe that you are resilient enough to bounce back and to be able to um, process your loss and manage your grief.
Mhm.
So I like to put the brakes on, as a therapist myself, like accepting kids or adults and families to, like, I'm like, wait a minute, how long ago was it lost? Wait, okay, yesterday?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? No,
Yeah.
you guys, you trying to jump into therapy without having gone to the wake yet? Right? And so,
Yeah.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
So, like, putting the brakes on it for a little bit, allow people's natural strengths, their resiliency, the things that mommy and papi showed you how to do, and right, the things that our community has shown us. Use what you have first. Believe in what you have. You have strengths, you have psychological strengths, you've done. Remind yourself of other challenges that you've overcome. How did you overcome it? Do that first. Try that. Be
Mhm.
resilient. And then, and if that is not working, right? And now, not only is it not working, or maybe for whatever reason, you're in a state in life where, you're not sleeping well and you're not doing well. There's other stressors happening that is making it hard for you to remember who you were, to remember how strong you were, right? Then you might need help, right? Then you might need to reach out for support. If you find that things are deteriorating around you, and you know, you're getting to work late every time, right? Because you're just constantly ruminating on the loss that you've had and the grief, or so it's affecting your job, it's affecting your marriage or work, what, right? Then we're at a place where, yeah, you might need help.
Mm,
Hmm.
mm. Good
Yes, I think that's
point.
so important. Yes,
Yeah.
because our in our community, the message of loss and grief, it's confusing. It's very confusing,
Yeah.
and many times we do it alone. I feel like as family, sometimes we don't come together because we all have this belief like, I got to be strong for my sister, I got to be strong for my kids, I got to be strong for my husband. And so we don't come together. And the best thing to do when you're grieving a loss is to come together as a family. Do you notice that with the Latino community, Carlos, that we
Yeah, I
do
mean,
that?
I think one thing, Latinos, we're like so many kinds of Latinos, and we all have our different rituals and customs and traditions. Is beautiful. To both, um, me, I'm grateful and happy to be Latino, and I'm happy to always to be around my Latinos as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I see our families, functioning very differently. You know, but for the most part, what's something that's prevalent in our community as a Latino community is like this culture of silence. It's like not speaking. Don't talk about what happens here, stays here. Don't you go
Mm.
out and share with anybody what happened. And I think the challenge with the culture of silence is, without it, it can pose as a barrier to getting help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something as Latinos in particular we should be mindful about, is that we don't want to necessarily ask for help, and we actually kind of in many ways are encouraged not to do it.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's so true. It's yeah.
Wow. Carlos, based on your experience, right? Can you discuss like the roles that Latino families play when it comes to grieving? What do you recommend we do different? So people can figure out how to receive this help and support, because dealing with these emotions and carrying this grief and pain can be very difficult. And I know a lot of people in, my family that don't deal with grief very well. So, what do you recommend?
Yeah, it's a good question because actually I'm oftentimes trying to figure that out as I'm meeting with families, right? Because
Mhm,
the roles in the family, even within different Latino families, are different. Like there's some families where you know it's no mom and dad; the grandparents are raising the children,
mhm,
and then there's family that there maybe just one grandparent, mom and dad are in and out the home. Then there's a family where, single mom or single dad, or in Latinos, there's a lot of grandparents raising the kids.
mhm,
One, because of our, one, poverty is a big thing. And, if the parent is still involved and they're having to go out and work, then the grandpa or grandma is watching and doing a lot of the caretaking.
mhm,
Mm-hmm.
So the roles look vastly different.
mhm,
Um, and I think we keep grandparents. That's another thing. Like our families tend to be multi-generational. They oftentimes live in this all together. Like it's really rare to see like Latinos, or at least like my experience, putting grandma or grandpa in a home, right? They
mhm.
they stay there. They
Yeah,
stay there.
yeah,
They're part of it, right?
Yeah.
And right, and I haven't experienced any of them wanting to go either.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think they make it clear too as they're growing. Like, no me pongan home. A mí no me metan home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess to answer the question, like the roles that we play in the family, getting to know the family that I'm working with is probably the first, because I gotta ask those questions. Who does what, right?
Mm,
Is the kid parenting themselves, right? Right? Is mom taking, out? Mom and dad are out for the most part, and they leave you with with the 15-year-old who's taking care of the 8-year-old and the 7-year-old. I don't know, right? And so I part of the therapy in the beginning when you're assessing is figuring out who does what
mm,
in the family, right?
mm,
And then once you figure out who does what, now the person that was lost, that right, the person that died or that left, how is the dynamics in the family now shifting that now that they're not there, right?
mm,
So if this person was a disciplinarian and they're not there because they died or they divorced or separation, whatever the loss was, who's taking on that role? And if you don't have these conversations out, like, right, like explicitly in the family, or if you avoid having these conversations, then it leads to a lot of confusion in the family. No one knows who's setting the rules here now, who's doing what,
mhm.
right? And yeah, so it gets really, really complicated. Every situation is unique.
Yeah.
It
Mm,
is. But you're absolutely right. And I think that's where the whole thing comes with how do we get support in grief and loss, right? If we don't really know our family's dynamic and roles. Mhm.
mhm.
Right.
Wow. Wow.
Right.
Mhm.
So, culturally, since we're like culturally sensitive to this topic in particular, a lot of it is kept to yourself. You
Yeah.
deal
Yo
with
estoy bien, yo
it.
estoy bien, yo estoy bien.
Y no me hable de depresión, y no me hable de nada. How would you start a conversation when you're within a family, like together in a group? How would you navigate that or recommend a person
Mm.
does?
Yeah. I mean, I think first it's like being open to listen, right? I think, remember the culture of silence we were talking about, that usually within the first session or two, I've heard kids and adults say, I don't know if I don't know if I could trust people when I'm talking to them. And basically what they're saying is, I don't trust you. But they're not telling me right out to my face, but they're saying, I don't trust you. Right? Right? And so, like, because of the culture of silence and with the Latinos, we have to tread carefully, right? We have to, like, be open to encourage them to tell their story. And then as they're telling their story around their loss, you can hear other stories, right? And you start to recognize that, some stories may not be true, right? Sometimes there's lies around why the person died or why the person's no longer there. So there's these false stories that come up. And I like to address false stories early on in treatment, because then I start to feel like I'm colluding in the false story if I'm trying to get you to believe it, right? For example, so if a kid is like, a lot of times, if a family shares with a child that your daddy is away at school, but daddy's incarcerated, or daddy got deported, right? And now I want you to get counseling with Carlos, but don't tell them that dad is incarcerated. Tell them that he's in school.
Oh my God, so complicated.
Yes.
Like,
Wow.
wait a minute. Very early on, encourage the story, and you gotta recognize and ask questions. You gotta see which ones are false stories, which ones are things that they're telling themselves because they don't want to say the truth, because it's too much of a taboo, or the type of loss is highly stigmatized. And so we get to, like, I don't like to continue on with treatment into, like, especially around in a groups, like if it's a group therapy with especially with children, if it's going to be centered around a false story. And so that's, like, what's happening in the beginning. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but all that's, like, the early stages of therapy.
Okay. Yeah.
That happens a lot too. But the example you gave, it happens a lot, especially in our community. Like in regards to the caregiver being incarcerated, or even in regards to how the person passed away, where the family is not being 100% truthful about it. And so
Los
that also,
secretos.
that also creates a difficult safe space to be able to sit and grieve with others. It's like you said, there's a lot of, like, shame and don't share this and don't, like, how do you overcome that, right? So that we're able to grieve together and feel comfortable saying the truth. I guess that's also the family's dynamic, right, Carlos? Like how they deal with traumas and challenges and adversity.
Yeah, I think it's one. How have the family been a protective factor for the person that's grieving, right? And then if they're all grieving, right, then sometimes they're all grieving a loss, and they're like, okay, we're just sending one person to counseling for it, right? And it's like,
Who's the
right?
worst? Hold on, out of the 5, who's
Who's sitting with this?
Who's
Who's
the worst?
dealing with this in the
We
worst way?
all point that one person, like,
Yeah.
Like, it's been a week and you're still crying. You're the one that has to go to counseling.
It's
And
true.
usually the one that gets sent to the counseling is the one that's actually, like, telling the story.
Yeah.
Right? Like grief.
It's the one that's not
Okay.
avoiding. It's the
Yeah.
one that is open to talk about it. And they're probably the one that's it's all the other people that are avoiding,
Because they're holding it in, yeah.
right? But it's so
Yeah.
funny. It's weird. It's like, in many ways, maybe you should be the one in getting treatment, because actually the person that's grieving outright and is noticeable is processing those emotions, whereas
Exactly.
but they're being made to seem as they are the worst griever, or they're grieving
Yeah.
the worst. Right?
Funny, but it's
It's
actually
like,
they're releasing, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
family
Yeah.
thing.
You know that when I was diagnosed with my heart condition and my life changed, I grieved that a lot. The loss of who I was no longer the person that I was. And
Mm.
I remember times crying in front of my parents because I was scared and also I was like sad of my loss. I was no longer Jessie. I was trying to figure out who I was now with this illness. And they used to be like, no, no, no te pongas a llorar. No, eso, mira, eso te causa depresión. Oye, y el corazón se te pone peor.
Mhm.
El corazón te pone peor.
Jesse,
No,
suppress all of your emotions right now.
tú tienes que ser fuerte. Tú tienes que ser fuerte.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a Latino, as
Yeah.
Latinos, it's all about, how you look to others too.
Oh yeah.
So that's like the major thing, like how you grieve. No te pongas loca, que aquí viene tal fulana. Y si te ve
Right.
llorando, va a decir que tú eres loca. Compórtate bien. Like everything
Yeah.
needs to look and be a certain way because of the other people. I'm like,
Yeah,
who cares?
I feel it's also like we said, grief is such a like complex thing. It's not like it looks in, you go through all of these different kinds of things, and in our community we don't know how to hold space for people because we were never, no one, like growing up, no one held space for you, so you don't know how to do that for other people. And the way that we think that we're holding space is by like, telling you to be strong. How can I fix it? How can I fix you? And with grief, I think that looks harder because it can take so long and it's such like an up and down. It's like moving forward and moving back to that. I think it's difficult for a family that doesn't really know how to like emotionally support others or themselves to like really give that, emotional support to that person. So they're like, yo, this dude doesn't stop crying. You gotta go see
Yeah.
somebody because
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. It's like, go see somebody so you can stop.
Yeah.
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 Load this to
Yeah.
somebody else. I don't have the time for
Yeah.
this.
No. Or they say like, no, si tú comienzas a llorar y por preocuparte, entonces va a poner los hijos deprimidos, va a poner el esposo deprimido. Tú no puedes enseñarle eso.
Yeah.
Cry in the shower by yourself.
Right.
Yes.
It's okay.
And when you come out, make sure that your eyes are not red because it's like, you were
A
crying.
little bit of makeup, a little bit
A lot of pressure, right?
yeah.
It's insane. So, like we spoke about, like grief can manifest in various forms. You said physical, emotional, psychological. I feel like one grief that we don't talk about, maybe not everybody goes through this, but I did. Like when I became a new mom, I grieved my past life. Like I became a mom at 33. So I lived, my life was set up, and now it changed because I have
It
like
was
this
all
new
about
person
Maggie
I need to take
before.
care of. Exactly. And I feel like a lot of moms go through this and don't really talk about it. And for me, that's a form of grieving. Like I missed my own life. Like I loved my son and my new life, but I missed it. There were times where I'd be like, if I could get into a time machine and just go back to like 2015 for 2 hours, I would do that right now. But talking about all those different forms of grief, how do you like assist clients in recognizing and addressing these facets? Because I feel like we're really good at being like, someone died, we're grieving. But everything else is like Jessie, with her heart, or like I can go to my parents and be like, I'm a little sad because I'm missing my whole life. They would not understand that, right? How do you help them recognize like these different types of grief,
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Just to tie this question with what your stories that you shared about, becoming a mom and Jasenia, getting sick and who you were before, right? Like to my own, I remember my mom, like every time I would cry watching a movie as a kid, she'll turn around and point at me, oh, you're crying. Look, he's crying. Look, everybody, right? Like it was like, don't cry, or we'll get you got to be a big boy, or you got to be a big
Oh
girl.
my God. Yep.
You got to be a big girl. What does that mean, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think all that are ways that as a culture we sort of like suppress those, right, our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but because it's been happening for so long, we it I have to really walk into these situations with families to really try not to be judgmental, especially because I'm Latino,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, because if you go in there and you're like, hey, you know, your family did this to you, right? They're gonna be like, damn, I'm really effed up, right? And like,
Yeah.
and then they're gonna walk out session like angry
Worse,
and
worse.
and resentful.
I hate my mother. I hate my father.
I hate you. Look what you did to me. Like I hate you, right? Like, and so that is not the course of treatment, right? I cannot go there.
Mm.
But because I'm Latino, it it can I feel it in my heart
Mm.
when I'm working with them because I know it and I can't say it right then and there. But what I try to do is connect it to something higher, which is our culture has a way
Mm.
of handling these sort of situations. Here's how we handle it. We tend to handle it as a culture. Here's how we handle it as a society, right? That way it's not going to have them going back placing blame. Blame is a big barrier to healing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think as a therapist we got to be mindful of whether or not I am encouraging blame in my practice. And so I you know, I like to connect it to we're all this has happened to all of us. It's not your fault. It's not your fault of the loss that happened. It's not your family's fault. It's happened. Like we've been taught to suppress our emotions, right? But that in itself is not evil, right? Yes, it makes life harder, suppressing emotion, yes, but it's a way that we deal with pain. It's a way that we taught ourselves to deal with our pain. And so rather than jumping in as a therapist and say, don't do that no more, you can't suppress emotions, I can't, right? Because I'm taking away one of the only things that they only know how to manage their conflict and their pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I cannot say remove one way of defending yourself psychologically from pain without introducing other ones that you can use, right? Because then I leave you with nothing to
Yeah.
cope.
Wow. Wow. It's so true. I never even thought of it like that. It's got to be so. I mean, you guys as therapists, you guys have an amazing gift, to hold space and to really figure out how to respond to people and really taking into accountability that anything you say can really trigger, one of your patients. And for grief itself, like, I give you so much props because this is you helping these people deal with probably one of the most difficult moments. Losing anything or anybody is so freaking challenging. And that's awesome. Carlos, you're awesome.
Yeah, you're doing
Isn't
great
he?
work.
I told you. I
Yeah,
told you.
Yeah.
Es un diamante escondido en mi support system.
Yeah, I'm serious. It's one of those things that we all go through constantly. We're not going to live forever, and people we love sometimes don't get to stay as long as we want them to stay, but they're with us in our heart. But learning how to deal with these losses is so challenging and so delicate. And there's times, like, for me, like, I lost an aunt recently, and every time I think I'm fine. And then I start, accepting. I'm like, oh, she's in a better place and I love her and she's in my heart. And then all of a sudden I'm crying and then I'm angry. And it's just like a roller coaster, or like you say, como a spiked iced tea, a Long Island iced tea, a Long Island iced tea within me. And I'm just dealing with it. And sometimes I really don't have someone to talk about it with, and I don't even want to reach, my aunt's children because I don't even, probably they're not even thinking about it. So then you're like suppressing it and you're on your own in it. So again, it's just amazing what you do.
yeah.
Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really, really good work. So, what would you say to, let's say, one of our listeners that's probably dealing with grief right now, or it's grieving someone or a moment in their life, and what mechanism can they take, or what steps can they take to like help them manage this better, manage this moment better?
Hmm. I mean, if it's something very practical and simple, I would say to the viewers and whoever's experiencing grief now, acknowledge that you're going through something, right? And give it a name, and it's grief, right? I think when we acknowledge and give something a name, it's powerful because it allows us to not feel like something's wrong with me, but no, I'm going through this. It creates some distance from us and the problem. And once, for some of us, when we could create some distance from us and the problem, then the problem now feels a bit more manageable, right? And so acknowledge it that it's there, call it for what it is. It's grief. Normalize that it is okay and that we all have it. Validate that this is not there's nothing wrong with you. This is what you should be, right? And if he wasn't grieving, then I'd be like, whoa, then
What's
what's
wrong
going
with
on
him?
here? Right. Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you should be
You're a
grieving.
psychopath.
Right. I just lost someone. Move on. Right? Like,
It's been a
you know,
week. I'm over it.
hey, right? Just acknowledge it. You're experiencing something, call it grief, give it a name. It helps you feel like you can have control over it. Normalize the grief in all its different ways and manifestations, right? And like I said earlier, connect it, listen to stories, connecting it to us as a Latino community or from whatever culture or society you're from, framing it in its larger cultural context, right? Like, I know it's hard for us to talk about, but it's not our fault. It's really like we've been doing this for some time now. Intergenerationally, we've been doing this for some time now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Make time.
Yeah.
Make time. If the first time you talk about it with your family, it's hard, but then the second time it's easier. The third time gets easier. The fourth time, and then before you know it, you're talking about it, eating ice cream at the same time and having
Yeah.
snacks. So
Yeah.
just get over the initial hump, and then keep doing it little by little, and it gets easier.
Yeah. That's so true. Because, when I was, like I said, when I was going through that whole loss about me and being sick, at first, my parents, they used to be like, don't cry, don't do this. And I used to get really angry at them for that. I had to kind of realize, like, it's not that they don't want me to cry. It's just that they don't know how to hold this space. So
Mm-hmm.
if I want them to hold the space for me, I think I'm going to have to teach them. Right. So then as I used to cry and they used to be like, no llore, no llore, I used to say, mami, yo todavía soy fuerte, pero en este momento me siento triste y en este momento quiero llorar. Pero no es que yo no soy fuerte, es que ahora mismo pensando como yo era antes, me hace sentir triste. No es que
Mm-hmm.
yo me estoy poniendo mala o que el corazón se me va a poner malo, es simplemente pasando por esta emoción. Sí, pero tú tienes que tener cuidado. Like her tone would change.
Yeah.
She wouldn't fully agree with me, but her tone would change, and reflect on it. So sometimes these spaces, it's all about breaking the cycle. And if you're the one breaking it, it's showing how to do it, right? How to hold the space. Sometimes that works.
Yeah, they're not familiar, they
No.
don't recognize that this is something that needs to be broken. And I can only imagine how hard it is. This is what they were taught. So they're like, it's like even me, like when, let's say my daughter falls or something, when she was young, y ella corría, yo me ponía tan nerviosa that I'd be like, coño, estate tranquila, tú te va a caer de nuevo. En vez de decirle like, Alicia, just take it easy and you're going to scrape your knee. But all that fear, because I didn't know how to handle my emotions back then, went to her. So I can only imagine her fear, seeing her daughter crying y desesperada and stuff like that. No llore, no llore. It's her telling herself.
Yeah,
No
it's her.
llore.
Oh, agárrate de Dios, agárrate de Dios, agárrate de Dios.
They love to say that.
I asked him everything. I'm holding him.
Ponlo en la mano de Dios.
Pon todo en la mano de Dios.
My God.
You know, one of the things that I you know, maybe you have some insights, and I know people that have lost someone, a pet, for instance. You know, I lost one of my pets a long time ago, Carlos, and he was part of the family, and it's going to be 2 years now. I have so many memories, and the way I feel closer to my dog is looking at him, and I go right back to those moments, like those pictures that I took, and I'm like, oh my God, Flash. Like, what do you tell a person that's going through something like this, or doesn't even want to look or even connect to that was lost?
Yeah. Oh, wow. You brought up something really great about like pets in general too.
Mm-hmm.
So much about loss is of our attachment to people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a parent, you got kids, right? Uh, you love your kids. They grow up, they leave the home, they start their own family, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so they learn to be more, hopefully, right? They learn to be more.
That's the goal.
That's the goal, right? Hopefully, is that they learn to be more self-sufficient, right? But
Yeah.
then you see them leave the home and they start their own family, right? Pets really rely on you throughout their entire life. So the attachment is consistent. It's a
Yeah.
constant. It's a constant dependency on you, and it doesn't change like it does with our children. And so when we lose our pets that heavily relied on us to live and for right to for their health and for all these things, it can be devastating for many people, because so much of they relied on you.
Yeah.
You were their everything. They really relied on you there in order to be sufficient. And so it's a different kind of loss, right? Because it really
Mm-hmm.
eats at you as a caretaker, and for someone that you have to that really is depending on
Yeah.
you for their entire life. Right.
Yeah.
So different
Yeah.
kind of loss. But I forgot the second part of the question.
No, it's just like I know there's like so many different parts of grief. But with the pet, like you said, is so interesting, and for a person not to want to even look. Hence, like me, I'm like the polar opposite. I'm like, give me more memories. He's like, I don't want to see any of it. It's like I don't want to feel this connection that I've lost anymore, because it's just so much. Like, what do you tell somebody that's lost something, even a goldfish, like that
Right.
they were so attached to, and they're just like disconnected? Just, I guess, giving them the space to let them know, right, that whenever you're ready to see more, right? Or what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like an example of how grief can kind of remain frozen.
Mhm.
Um, like the more we're able to process and talk about it and manage it, we're gonna make mistakes along the way, right? You know, there's no one correct way that we should do it. But in my experience, like when grief gets frozen in that way, where you don't feel like you can confront it, or you don't want to process it, it can make grief later on down, like loss later on down the road, it can make you feel not as prepared, to deal with it. And I think it can impact people in ways that we don't even understand completely right now, like not processing emotions and not dealing with a challenge in life and ignoring it and avoiding it. As you can imagine, it sort of
Yeah.
like branches and out into other parts of your life, without you
Yeah.
knowing. It's
That's
like a weed
true.
it's like a weed in your garden. You don't want to, you don't take it out. You leave it there, you ignore it, and then it's like the roots are getting spreading and spreading, and then it starts eating up the source of energy for the tulips and the blah, blah, blah. It starts impacting the surrounding. So
Yeah.
frozen, like when things get frozen that way, it can be quite complicated. But
Um,
you got to think about how are they trying to defend themselves? What is this avoidance and resistance? What is this resistance and avoidance serving them, right?
Mm.
And if it's just helping them go on their day to day, like they need to learn a different way to cope, so that they can process the emotions.
Yeah.
And in therapy, you figure that out. You explore that together.
Nice. Thank you, Carlos.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Loss of a pet is big. Yeah, it's a big one because you really love them. I had this chicken once in DR, and he would walk with me. You know, if I would move there, you know, when I was sitting down watching TV, he would curl up here. And our pit bull that was very jealous se lo comió.
Ay, Dios mío, that's
I know.
traumatic.
He was like, yo, I'm gonna get this, and he found a way. He killed him.
Oh
And
my
remember, I dressed in black, and mommy and I are going to church that day, and I'm like, mommy, do you think that we could like have a moment in the church and say, you know, like a prayer for the chicken? And she's like, la iglesia no es un juego. Ya ese pollo se murió.
That is our mother.
Maggie, I'm so sorry. Everything that happened in that story was so sad and like crazy.
Trauma.
Oh my God. That was intense.
Yeah, right.
Like the next day, she goes, "Ay, Jesús, el pollito, sí, tú no lo oyes ya." I'm like, no, he's dead.
Oh my God, Maggie, that's insane.
Yeah. But Carlos, so we're going to answer your signature question that we ask everybody, right? And it is, no matter how big you get, you're like Carlos, the grief guru. And you're like on all these talk shows and everything. What is the one thing that no matter where you are, how big you are, that one Puerto Rican thing that nobody can take away from you?
I'm gonna say that one thing is, actually, it's a word. It's a word that I say, that I've been saying since I was a kid, and I still say it. Huepa.
What?
I love huepa, but I've been saying it, like, you know, it's just a good word. It's like
It is a good word.
Yeah, it's a good word. Like, you know, and when I think about when I use it, it's usually I'm around other people, right? It's a social thing to do. Like, no one's like huepa by themselves in the room, right? You're usually like saying huepa in front of people, or like you're something social. And it's it's almost like a call that invites others to celebrate. And that's
Yes.
like huepa. I'm not just saying, whoa, this is popping, or this is what's up. But it's like, huepa, this is popping. Come join me. Let's celebrate together. And that's what huepa means to me. And I love it because it's a reminder to celebrate, but to celebrate in community.
I love that. That word is so dope. I am so glad you shared this.
It is.
It is. And he does use it. He does.
Wow, Carlos came to our show. Oh my gosh.
It's so interesting because you're so good in regards to grief and loss, but you are such a lively person. Like, you are full of joy and happiness and fun. Like, I keep telling Heidi and Maggie, like, when we hang out, it's like you forget everything. It's just amazing because it's like we come, we have dinner, we talk about work, we talk about family, we talk about relationship. And then it's like, all right, let's just have some really good time tonight. It's so beautiful. It's just the balance of life. Like, you're so good at it. And thank you for always reminding me of that.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Jessie.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very much. And thank you.
Love you too.
Jessie, Maggie, thank you for inviting me. It was an honor to be here with you.
It was great to have you. I mean, the work that you do is amazing. It's needed. It
Yeah.
So
really,
much.
really is. Thank you so, so much for the work that you're doing, for, helping our people, our community. Thank you for saying yes to our podcast. This is a
Yeah.
really, really great time.
Carlos, where can we find you?
You can find me on Hello Alma. And when you're looking for a provider, you'll search Carlos Alvarez. You should run into my profile right away.
Wonderful. Thank
Amazing.
you. Thank you again
Awesome.
for
Thank you so much for
everything.
this. We are so honored to have you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
And
you
thank you
all.
to our listeners. And remember to share and follow and let everybody know how awesome we are.
And
And
download
thank
this
you.
episode.
Yes,
Download.
download this episode.
Yes.
Yes, this is a really
Yes.
good one.
Yes. You're going to need it in your life.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey there, podcast fam. Don't forget to click on the show notes and buy us a coffee. Your support not only quenches our thirst, but it also fuels our podcast with necessary subscriptions and equipment to keep it going strong. Every and any contribution means the world to us. Thank you for being a part of our journey. No Todo Secura Convicks loves you.